Have you ever laid in bed, eyes wide open, replaying one conversation 100 times in your mind? Or plan out imaginary disasters in your head, just in case? That is overthinking. It feels like thinking, but it's not. It's mental self-torture disguised as logic. In this video, we're going deep into the psychology of overthinking and how one line from a 2,000-year-old Stoic text changed everything for me. Before we get into the line from Meditations, let's understand what overthinking actually is and why your brain might be doing it in the first place. Overthinking is one of those quiet psychological traps that doesn't always scream for attention, but it slowly eats away at our peace, clarity, and emotional energy. Most people think of overthinking as just thinking too much, but that's not accurate. Real thinking has a structure, a direction, a purpose. Overthinking, on the other hand, is fragmented, circular, and rooted in fear. Psychologists define overthinking as repetitive, unproductive thought loops. It often takes the form of rumination, replaying the past, or worrying, obsessing about the future. You're either stuck in a moment you can't change or anticipating one you can't control. Either way, you're not present. But why does the brain even do this? It turns out overthinking isn't just a bad habit. It's a survival response. The human brain evolved to anticipate threats. It's wired to scan the environment, remember mistakes, and simulate scenarios that could go wrong, all in an attempt to keep us safe. In the Stone Age, that vigilance may have saved your life. But in the modern world, where most threats are emotional or social rather than physical, this ancient system becomes self-destructive. Let's say you sent a message and someone didn't reply. The rational part of your brain might say, they're probably busy, but the anxious part, the one wired for threat detection, starts spinning. Did I say something wrong? Are they upset? What if they never respond? Should I send another message? Or maybe not. What if they hate me now? That's not thinking. That's spiraling. And the worst part? Your brain treats those imagined scenarios as if they're real. It releases stress hormones, increases your heart rate, makes your muscles tense, even though nothing has actually happened. You're reacting to a threat that doesn't even exist. Overthinking can also be tied to self-esteem. People who doubt themselves tend to overanalyze because they don't trust their decisions, their instincts, or their worth. They seek certainty in a world that doesn't offer it. So they compensate by trying to think their way into safety. But that safety never comes. Only more doubt, more what-ifs, more paralysis. This is why overthinking often leads to procrastination and inaction. When you think too much, you start to fear making the wrong choice. And when you fear the wrong choice, you make no choice at all. You freeze. And that paralysis only feeds a cycle, because now you're not only overthinking, you're also frustrated with yourself for doing nothing. Overthinking can also be a trauma response. If you grew up in an environment where things were unpredictable, emotionally, physically, or socially, your mind may have learned to stay on high alert. You may have internalized the belief that you're responsible for anticipating every possible outcome, so you don't get hurt. But that constant state of mental hypervigilance becomes exhausting. The overthinker becomes a mental micromanager, trying to control the uncontrollable, calculate every risk, rehearse every scenario, read every expression, analyze every tone. It's no wonder the mind becomes tired. But here's the most ironic part. Overthinking gives the illusion of control. It tricks you into believing that if you think more, you'll somehow suffer less. That if you just analyze it long enough, you'll finally feel safe. But the truth is, safety doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from learning to let go. The goal of psychological clarity isn't to eliminate thinking. It's to direct it, to reclaim authority over your mind instead of letting your mind run you in circles. And that's exactly where Stoicism becomes relevant. The Stoics believed that the mind should be ruled by reason, not by emotion. But they didn't mean emotionlessness. They meant emotional discipline. A quiet mind, not a numb one. A calm observer, not a chaotic overthinker. For them, philosophy wasn't abstract. It was a tool to train your perception, your judgment, and your peace. That's why when I finally came across that one Stoic line, you have power over your mind, not outside events, it hit me. Overthinking isn't solved by thinking more. It's solved by thinking differently. But before we break down that line and how it changed my relationship with my mind, we first needed to understand this. Overthinking is not weakness. It's not madness. It's a misdirected strength, a powerful mind pointing in the wrong direction. When we hear the word Stoic, we often think of someone emotionless, someone who doesn't care, doesn't flinch, and never shows weakness. But that's a misunderstanding. True Stoicism isn't about killing emotion. It's about mastering perception. And nowhere is that more relevant than when it comes to our relationship with the mind. The Stoics believe that our judgment, not our circumstances, is the root of suffering, not the events themselves, but the meaning we attach to them. You can't control what happens, they said, but you can always control how you interpret it. This is one of the most powerful ideas ever written in the history of philosophy, especially for anyone dealing with anxiety, overthinking, or mental chaos, because it completely flips the script. Instead of fighting the world, Stoicism teaches you to manage your own lens. Imagine two people in the same storm. One sees it as a curse, a threat, a reason to panic. The other sees it as a test, a chance to practice courage, or simply a reality of nature. The storm is the same, but their experience of it is entirely different. Why? Because one has trained his mind to respond, while the other reacts automatically. One sees clearly. The other sees through the fog of emotion and assumption. This is the heart of Stoic training, to discipline the mind so it doesn't fall victim to its own distortions. To remind yourself, again and again, that your thoughts are not always facts, and your judgments are often your jailers. Epictetus, one of the most famous Stoic teachers, put it simply: men are not disturbed by things, but by the views which they take of things. In modern psychological terms, we'd call that cognitive reappraisal, the ability to reinterpret situation in a healthier, more grounded way. The Stoics were doing CBT thousands of years before it had a name. They believed the mind must be trained. Like a muscle, left untrained, it reacts to everything: insult, rejection, delay, disappointment, as if it's life or death. It spins stories, creates imaginary scenarios, and sinks into fear. That's where overthinking lives, in the untrained mind, constantly reacting, constantly needing certainty, constantly searching for control. But a trained mind? That's different. A trained mind pauses before it reacts. It asks, is this in my control? If the answer is no, then the Stoic lets it go, not out of passivity, but out of discipline. The Stoic understands. Clinging to what you can't control is madness. Peace isn't found in having control. It's found in surrendering to what's real. And what is real? Only this moment. Only your choices. Only your attitude. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, understood this perhaps better than anyone. He lived a life surrounded by war, political betrayal, sickness, and the constant awareness of death. And yet, in the middle of all that noise, he turned inward in his journal, now known as Meditations. He kept reminding himself of one thing: the outer world will never be fully in your hands, but your inner world, that's where your true power lives. He wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts." Think about that for a moment. If your mind is constantly in worry, judgment, jealousy, or fear, then your entire experience of life becomes colored by that energy. But if your thoughts are still reasonable and clear, then even chaos becomes manageable. Even pain becomes purposeful. Even suffering becomes silence. The Stoics didn't believe in repressing thoughts. They believed in examining them, observing them, letting them pass like clouds in the sky. To them, you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of those thoughts. And the more deeply you understand that, the less power those thoughts have over you. This is incredibly important when we talk about overthinking, because overthinking is what happens when we fuse with our thoughts. We become them. We identify with them. We get pulled into every scenario, every possibility, every imaginary future. But Stoicism gives us distance. It teaches us to pause and say, is this thought useful? Is this thought mine? Is this thought rooted in reality? Most of the time, it isn't. The Stoic mind isn't cold. It's calm. It isn't distant. It's deliberate. And in a world where mental health issues are often linked to excessive rumination, stress, and mental noise, Stoicism becomes not just philosophy, but medicine, a kind of mental hygiene, a daily practice of mental cleansing. Every day, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that death was coming, not to be morbid, but to sharpen his focus. Every day, Epictetus reminded his students that loss, pain, and insult are inevitable, but they only damage you if you allow them to enter your mind without examination. So, what do the Stoics tell us about the mind? That it's not a battlefield to be won. It's a garden to be cultivated. And when you tend to it with reason, reflection, and restraint, it becomes your greatest ally, not your worst enemy. And that, for anyone trapped in overthinking, is a truth worth remembering. There are certain lines in philosophy that don't just sound wise. They change something inside you. And for me, that shift happened when I read one simple sentence in Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you'll find strength. At first glance, the sentence seems obvious, almost too simple. But the more I reflected on it, the more I realized this one line contains the entire blueprint for mental freedom, especially for someone trapped in the endless loops of overthinking. Because what is overthinking, really? It's our mind reacting to something we can't control. It's the brain's desperate attempt to create certainty in a world full of unpredictability. It's the fear of what might happen, disguised as preparation, planning, or problem solving. But Marcus cuts through all of that. He says, your power begins and ends inside, not in the outcome, not in the other person, not in the timing or the result or the chaos around you, but in how you think, how you frame it, and how you respond. When you truly understand that, something shifts. You begin to realize that most of your stress, your anxiety, your overthinking isn't about what happened. It's about what you told yourself about what happened. It's the story you added to the moment. Think of a simple example. You send a message. No reply. What happens next? If you're like most people, the mind starts spinning. Did I say something wrong? Are they upset? Are they ignoring me? Should I say something again? Maybe I shouldn't have messaged in the first place. That spiral, that emotional noise, is the mind trying to control something it doesn't own. The reply is not in your control, but your thoughts about it are. Now imagine catching yourself in that moment and reminding yourself of Marcus's line. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Suddenly you realize, I don't need to suffer about this. I don't need to create pain where there is only uncertainty. I don't know what the silence means, so why write a negative script? This shift in perspective isn't a one-time thing. It's a practice. It's mental training. And that's exactly what Marcus was doing when he wrote Meditations. He wasn't writing a book. He was reminding himself every day that his piece depends not on the world, but on his mind. That's what makes Stoicism so unique. It doesn't deny that life is hard. In fact, it assumes it will be. You will be insulted. You will be rejected. You will experience loss, pain, betrayal, even death. The Stoics never lied about that. But what they insisted on was this. Those things cannot touch your soul unless you give them permission. Overthinking is that permission. It's how we let outer events crawl inside us. But when you remember that your mind is your responsibility, and only your mind, you start to reclaim your boundaries. And slowly, something beautiful happens. You begin to stop arguing with the world. You stop trying to make every outcome perfect, every person behave ideally, every plan goes smoothly. You start to live from the inside out, not the outside in. That's what Marcus means by you will find strength. It's not just inner peace. It's inner power. The kind of power that lets you stay still when others panic. That helps you listen instead of reacting. That helps you walk away instead of chasing. That helps you think clearly instead of overthinking endlessly. And here's the paradox. The more you accept that the outer world is not in your control, the more control you gain over your inner world. And in that space, overthinking loses its grip. You begin to see a thought, not as truth, not as identity, not as prophecy, but simply as a mental event, like a cloud passing through the sky. You don't have to hold it. You don't have to follow it. You can just observe it and let it pass. This one line from Meditations is more than ancient wisdom. It's psychological clarity. It's a shift from victimhood to authorship. It's a reminder that your peace isn't waiting at the end of perfect conditions. It's waiting inside your perception, now. So when you find yourself spiraling, when the noise in your head gets loud, when you're stuck in loops you can't escape, stop, breathe, remember, you have power over your mind, not outside events. And in that truth, if you truly realize it, you will find strength. Once you realize that overthinking isn't caused by events themselves, but by your interpretation of them, the next question becomes, how do I change that interpretation? How do I live Stoicism, not just understand it intellectually? The Stoics weren't interested in philosophical theories that stayed in the head. They believed philosophy was a daily practice, a discipline of the mind, like a workout for your thoughts, a cleansing for your perceptions. And if you suffer from overthinking, that discipline can feel like a lifeline, because it's one thing to understand that your judgments cause distress, and quite another to reshape those judgments in real time, especially when anxiety is flooding your system. That's why Stoicism offers us not just ideas, but exercises, mental habits you can actually apply when your thoughts begin to spiral. One of the simplest and most powerful Stoic tools is the practice of self-inquiry. When a thought arises, especially an anxious, racing, emotionally charged one, the Stoics invite you to pause and ask, is this in my control? That question, though small, is surgical. It cuts through the illusion, because overthinking thrives on confusion between what we can change and what we wish we could. You're worried they might leave. You're anxious about what they might say. You're replaying a decision you already made. But is that in your control anymore? Can you change it by thinking about it again? If not, the Stoic path is to let it go, not out of weakness, but out of inner discipline. This act of separating the internal from the external is called the dichotomy of control. It's the foundation of all Stoic practice, and it's something you can apply in almost every moment of overthinking. Is this my thought, my action, my attitude? Or is it something external, someone's opinion, a future outcome, a past event? Once you see the boundary clearly, your mind begins to loosen its grip. Another tool the Stoics used was negative visualization, which at first sounds counterintuitive. Why would you want to imagine bad things happening? But the Stoics weren't encouraging fear. They were training acceptance. Instead of living in the illusion that life must always go according to plan, they mentally rehearsed adversity. Rejection, loss, discomfort, even death. This gave them psychological readiness. So when something did go wrong, they weren't paralyzed by it. They had already made peace with that possibility. For the overthinker, this exercise can be powerful. Rather than obsessing about avoiding discomfort, you gently expose your mind to it. You say, what if it doesn't work out? Can I handle that? What if they misunderstand me? Will I survive? The answer usually is yes. And in that yes, the spiral begins to unwind. Another practice, central to Stoicism, is journaling, not to vent emotionally, but to reflect logically. Marcus Aurelius wrote Meditations not to impress readers, but to coach himself. Every entry is a quiet battle between the emperor and his own ego, fear, and confusion. He's reminding himself to stay calm, to see clearly, to think slowly. And we can do the same. When your mind feels full and your thoughts are racing, take them out of your head and put them on paper. Ask yourself, what exactly am I afraid of? Is this thought based on fact or fear? Am I assuming something I can't possibly know? The act of writing slows the mind down. It takes you out of emotional reactivity and into observation. And once you're observing, you're no longer consumed. Stoicism also teaches the importance of voluntary discomfort, choosing temporary difficulty to build long-term strength. This can mean taking a cold shower, fasting, walking without headphones, or simply sitting in silence without reacting to every impulse. Why does this help overthinking? Because overthinking is often the brain's way of running from discomfort. It wants to escape silence, uncertainty, and vulnerability. But when you train yourself to sit with those states, even briefly, you send your mind a message. I am safe, even in the unknown. I can stay calm, even when I don't have all the answers. And that message becomes a new belief, one that replaces the anxious need to control everything. Finally, there's a practice of daily reflection, a kind of mental hygiene at the end of each day. The Stoics would ask, what did I do well? Where did I lose control? Where can I improve? Not to judge themselves, but to evolve. It's a way of reviewing the mind's behavior, the same way an athlete reviews footage to improve performance. If you deal with overthinking, this ritual helps you notice patterns. You'll start to see the kinds of situations that trigger your spirals. You'll see how certain beliefs make you anxious, how certain assumptions make you angry. And with that awareness comes choice. You can't always control your first thought, but you can shape the second. In the end, Stoicism isn't a cure for overthinking in one day. It's a path, a disciplined way of returning, again and again, to what's real, what's in your hands, and what truly matters. It won't make life easy, but it will make your mind stronger. And a strong mind, Yanni, doesn't need everything to be perfect. It just needs to stay clear. So when the thoughts rise again, and they will, you'll have tools. You'll have habits. You'll have philosophy, not just in theory, but in motion. So now you know, overthinking isn't just a bad habit. It's the mind's confused attempt to protect you. It loops, it spirals, it simulates 100 futures, but it forgets to live in the only moment that's real, this one. And yet, 2,000 years ago, a Stoic emperor sitting alone in his tent, facing war, loss, and death, wrote one sentence to himself, not for the world, but for his own sanity. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That line didn't just live in a book. It lives inside us. Every time we pause the spiral, every time we choose presence over prediction, discipline over distortion, peace over performance. Stoicism doesn't promise that your thoughts will vanish, but it does promise that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who sees them. You are the one who chooses what to do next. And that choice, in every moment, every thought, every overthinking loop, is where your freedom begins. So the next time your mind starts spinning, don't try to silence it. Don't try to outrun it. Just return to the only thing that's ever truly yours. Your ability to pause, to breathe, and to remember. You have power over your mind. And that is enough.